I'm John Sargent, and it's December 2021. We're in San Francisco at the Fairmont Hotel at the California Alarm Association.
I'm Charlie Darsch with the Security Museum.
Nathan Rousted from Wayne Alarm Systems.
And I'm Ralph Sevenor from Wayne Alarm Systems and the Security Museum. We're delighted to have you here. We've been collecting artifacts for over 25 years, and we saw the need to really put all the people together that have created such a great industry. A lot to learn in this. Thank you very much for attending, and we look forward to your comments in the future as well. Thank you. Hi, I'm Ralph W. Sevenor. I'm from Wayne Alarm Systems, and we've been doing this for over 20 years of taking videos of really icons of the industry. So to my left is Kirk MacDowell. He has been in the industry many, many years, and we actually have a segment specifically for Kirk. And also Stan Martin to my right. And Stan, again, has incredible wisdom in the industry. Both are mentors of mine that I look up to, have for many years. And to my far right is Charlie Darsch. And Charlie has more experience in the alarm industry than I've been alive. So this is a cooperative project, and I turn it over to my friend Kirk. So Kirk, all yours.
Ralph, thank you. Honored to do this, and honored to share the seat, I would say stage, but seat with Charlie, and a very dear man and a mentor to many, and really someone that the industry looks up to.
Thank you.
So Stan, you and I work very, very cohesively together at SIAC, and I think when people think of Stan Martin, they think of SIAC. And they know the impact the last 19, 20 years you've had at SIAC. But you had a life before SIAC, and I think it's important for people to know what that life was. So tell us a little bit about what your background is. How did you get in the industry?
Yeah, I got out of the Air Force and went to work for Rockwell, and my background was electronics, and I was blessed to have an engineering position in a field called hybrid microelectronics. We took big things and shrunk them to the smallest possible size. And it was exciting because I got to work on the space shuttle electronics. I got to work on the first demand pacemaker because they needed things in smaller sizes. So I enjoyed the technology, and while I was there, I had a friend I knew from high school that said, "Hey, I know something about the alarm business. Do we want to keep working at Rockwell the rest of our life?" And I was pretty young at the time, in my 20s. I go, "Nah, this bureaucracy is driving me crazy. Let's go start our own company."
What year was this now?
This was 1975, somewhere in there, Charlie. And so we did, but it wasn't a full time. We started part time, and slowly but surely they laid off people from Rockwell, and the government, the space shuttle thing wound down. And anyway, the alarm business was good, it stuck, but it was several years of working it by myself before I realized I need to start networking and get out in the state and national meetings. And that's really when the business took off, and then because the things you learn, right?
So that company, that was a security alarm company in Dallas. Did you do residential and commercial? And what product did you use? Because I think that was all germane to your career choices after that.
Yeah, we did residential and commercial. We were not licensed for fire, but our niche was home builder market. We went from nothing within a few years to working for over 200 builders in the Dallas area, and a very exciting time. And of course, growth is still strong in Dallas. But we used the Demco products, and eventually our high-end product ended up being DMP. And since we're doing something that's historical, I'll say that we were one of the first companies that, for those that know the history of DMP, Marvin Britton actually came into town and sold me personally on the DMP product. So we actually got to use that product in a way they hadn't seen used before. We used all the features, and they weren't used to that. They had to come back and re-engineer a couple of things, but some interesting history there.
How did you transition from an alarm company into the Honeywell organization?
Well, I eventually, after about 15 years, got an offer from Chubb to sell the company, and I sold it. It was, and I continued on with him for a while, but like it happens so many times, you don't adjust as you'd like to the larger corporate. And this was a UK company anyway. It was even stranger, and not knocking them, but it was different. Okay, and just got a call one day from Pat Egan after I left Chubb, and he said, "Hey, we need some help up here in DC." So I said, "Okay, I'll come up there for a while, but I've got my family in Dallas." And Pat said, "Just give me 6 months." Well, 2 years. This was right in the middle of fighting the Bell operating companies.
And who was Pat with at the time?
Well, Pat had
his own.
Yeah, Pat had his own company.
Was that Commonwealth?
Commonwealth.
So
yeah.
you went from your company selling it to Chubb to Commonwealth.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I wasn't quite clear. He actually asked me to run the National Burglar and Fire Alarm Association.
Perfect.
I didn't, thanks for getting me clear on that. Now it's called ESA, and I said, sure, I could do that for 6 months. But it ended up being a year and a half. We got to fighting the bells, and next thing I know, Honeywell, or at the time it was Pitway, Leo and Steve Roth say, "Hey, when you're ready to leave NBFAA, we've got a spot for you over here." And, wasn't too long, Pitway sold out to Honeywell. I was vice president for 8 years at Honeywell, but got so much good experience working for those guys. And of course, tremendous respect. I hope we get them on video someday too.
And so you worked for Leo. I know you have very, very high regard for Leo.
Oh yeah, amazing individual, such insight. He recognized there was a need, and just a need for industry relations. There was a need to help the dealers, even if they didn't know they needed help with a false alarm issue. I mean, he basically funded, my position. I mean, in those days, they created budget if they needed to work an issue, and let me run around the country,
On behalf
of ADI, of ADI specifically, and eventually Honeywell, working on false alarm reduction police relationships.
And this was all before SIAC.
Yes, in fact, little known tidbit of history here. Not many people know this, but right at that time, the ICP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, had proposed a resolution to the unilateral withdrawal of police response across the country. And,
What year was that?
you can't ask me the date thing anymore. But it was in, it was in
the era.
Yeah, it was in the 80s.
It was in the 80s, yes,
And
early 80s.
I happened to be in the right place at the right time. I got to go to some of the law enforcement meetings and said, "Hey, we're working on this thing called false alarms. Just give us a little bit of time. Don't stop police response. It's going to hurt the citizens, not the alarm industry." And they said, "Okay, give it a try." And fortunately, ADI, funded those activities. We did the Model Cities, Model States program, and we showed ICP that we could start to reduce it. But it took quite a few years to get there. But
So that was all that's when you were ADI. So can we say that ADI, Honeywell, Pitway were probably the grandfathers of SIAC?
sure, they seeded money, that wouldn't have been found, anywhere else, because they understood the importance of police response and reducing. They knew that false alarms left unchecked. I mean, back when this started, we were looking at 30 to 40% of police response time going to responding to alarms. I mean, unacceptable.
One of the things that you mentioned, particularly with ADI, one of the problems really was a problem was competition. The number of other companies that couldn't understand why ADI would fund it alone without any of the other companies responding to the problem. And it took time. I happen to be in one of those that had to explain, and I'm a competitor again at that time.
Right.
Trying to explain why this problem had festered the way that it had. And again, particularly being funded by them.
Yeah, my credit, and that's a great point, and I'll make a comment and a question. So the comment is whenever something like this happens, either somebody steps up to the front and says, I'm gonna lead this, or what they do is they cower and let everyone else take care of the problem. So the credit to ADI, Honeywell, Residio, you know, all the names for stepping up. So when you were at ADI, Honeywell as VP for how long, and then how did the formulation of SIAC occur? Because now there's two representatives from each association as an umbrella without specific motives in any one area. So talk to us about that.
Yeah, it's a bit convoluted there because the transition, ADI worked really with ARIF, the Alarm Industry Research and Education Foundation, you know, which Charlie
was on the board for years.
Board and kind of ran things there for a while.
Chairman for
years,
years, yes.
But at some point, there was a calling in my life to go to work for the church for about 2 years, and I left ADI. But the ARIF board came to me and said, we can't let the false alarm, the alarm issue stop. Would you give us 10 or 15 hours a week, okay, on the side, you know, with your church work? I said, sure. And so I did that for about 2 years, and then, you know, realized that, again, hard to explain, but I was going, you know, explain to the church, there were changes going on there that I needed to transition back into the corporate world, and just precisely at that time, and I really call this God's timing, the associations came to me, ESA, still NBFAA back then, SIA and CSAA, which is now TMA, and said, you know, the presidents have gotten together and we've decided we need a unique entity to represent the industry to law enforcement. Stan, if you work with Leo, could you guys put something together? And it was exactly 20 years ago, in January, this one I do remember, December of 2002, that you know, SIAC was formed, as you said, and it was, we didn't have membership dues because none of the associations wanted us to compete with them, okay? So no membership dues, and they wanted to control it, so they put 2 members from each association on the board, and then 2 from CANASA, wanting our northern border folks to participate as well. And then from that point, they would elect a chairman. Leo was elected. ARIF transferred the funding, the residual funding that was left, into that program as startup money. And then these same players, you know, Honeywell, Residio, Demco, all of them, you know, well, wrong order of names there, but Demco, Honeywell, and Residio, you know, continued to seed money into SIAC to give us a chance of birth and growth, and we were able to hire a couple people and take off. So
As they do today. They're still,
they have never, you know, and maybe somebody might criticize me for just talking about them so much, but the fact is, they've put multi-million dollars in for dealers over the years into these programs. It wasn't self-serving, it was for the industry. And you know, you got to have respect for folks that year after year after year, they don't talk about it. And I'm talking about small amounts of money. I'm talking about, you know, even up through this year, 2021, which is when we're recording this, they put $100,000, which is 15% of our entire budget, came from Residio. So my hat's off to them.
Stay with me. Well, let's go back for a minute to changes in the industry, and then I want to go forward and have you predict the next couple of years from a SIAC perspective. But go back to the industry. What do you think are the biggest transitions that have? Give me a couple of transitions in the industry that have been very, very significant from your point of view.
Yeah, I want to say it's not been all about false alarms. Fighting the Bell operating companies was a huge issue, and there weren't a lot of people that understood that. The Bells are not going to be a threat, but people forget the Bells controlled all communications back then. You didn't have any alternatives to the Bells, and they were able. The example we use in Congress is the answering service business. People in their 20s or 30s today, answering service was that. The Bells put those guys out of business because of voicemail, and basically, just moved people off. And anyway, they controlled all communications, and all we needed from Congress was a 7-year window where they couldn't come in and compete with us because they would have wiped us out. There's no doubt in our minds. And we were able to be successful. In fact, we talked about the fact we probably should write a book about it, because we were the only entity that was ever had that level of success against the Bell operating companies, because they had tens of millions of dollars they poured into lobbyists. But when we showed up on the doorstep, alarm dealers showed up on the alarms, members of Congress, they heard us. And I can say there was a little trickery, okay? Another unknown secret, that when we had those blitzes in Washington, D.C., I might be there from Texas with one other guy, but we'd take the guys from New Jersey or Oregon, and I'd go see my congressman with all these other state reps, right, from other alarm dealers. So it looked like there were 10 or 15 people from Texas. And then when we went to the New Jersey or Massachusetts senator or congressman, we take the guys from Texas and Oregon and Illinois. And,
Even if you had a Boston
yeah,
accent.
and they never wanted to know everybody's name, so we worked. It looked like anyway. We took 50 people or 60 people, made it look like we had 1,000 in Washington D.C.
Absolutely.
And it turned the tide. We eventually got what we needed from the Bells, that seven-year moratorium, and I think we're all here and successful in business because of that. Don't get me wrong, I'm not taking credit. I'm saying we had a good team of people, leaders.
Well, I don't think you were devious at all. I think you were just playing politics. And one other quick story about Stan. Stan testified in Congress on behalf of the industry, and so that was exciting. So tell us from a SIAC perspective, what do you think the biggest threats are to the industry from either a SIAC position or outside? What do you see happening that is 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if you look back and say, yeah, I thought that was going to happen and it did?
Of course, I don't have a crystal ball. I think there's people have had concerns about do-it-yourself systems, but so far, it's not had a major impact. I don't see and maybe it's just the way I'm built, it's the way I've always operated. I don't look at things from a threat point of view. I look at how do we provide a better service? How do we do a better job? And when you provide a better service to a customer, you have to pay attention to what's going on around you, but you're ensuring your future. And in this case, my answer would be, the technology we have available, if we can harness that, if we can produce and deliver consistent messages to law enforcement, help them catch bad guys, the AVS 01 standard, once that's actually employed and people are trained to that, and police are able to start catching bad guys in a consistent way. It's got to be done consistently and by a standard. The value of our service is going to go up tremendously, and it will ensure. I believe it will ensure our future. So we have to invest in in these standards, in the training it takes to deliver good information to law enforcement.
Well, let's go for just a minute and change the subject a little bit. Tell us your funniest or humoristic story about the industry. Over the years, you've had to have many.
I can think of, two. One of them has to do with Charlie right here. I didn't know Charlie was going to be here today. Now, Charlie looks like he is a mild-mannered gentleman, okay? You never hear anything come out of his mouth that's negative. I remember sitting around a table with a dozen of the top alarm companies in the country, and they were bending his ear and Demko at the time on building a panel. They said, you need to build a panel that's false alarm proof, and it's got all these bells and whistles, okay, and it's going to be perfect. And he said, we would buy that, and we'd pay whatever it cost, and they were telling him, Charlie just turned red. And he jumped up and he pounded his fist and said, bullshit. He said, you guys are too cheap. You won't pay a penny more for these panels.
This is the truth.
Yeah, it is. It
I'll
is.
never forget this one.
Yeah, and
I was so crushed on angry.
not a word.
Hasn't changed.
Because they knew it was true. They knew it was true. And it's one of the most...
I think
it was funny. It was funny.
Something that
He was
I
just really...
almost never regretted, but I decided that it was something that I wish we had fully continued at that time. It just took time. It was something that we couldn't push it through completely until everybody understood what this problem was.
Right.
And again, nobody, major companies, smaller companies, anybody that was building any products for the industry, they were breaking their necks trying to get product out.
Yeah, but everyone's looking for a solution, but not willing to accept
You got it.
the steps that they need to take to get there. So you said there were two. So one was with Charlie. Who was the other one with?
The other one was Bob. Should be a surprise. Bob Boniface. I remember attending a seminar of his, and I was in my earlier days, and he was talking about you have to have a contract for everyone. And I don't know, I challenged Bob, in front of the whole group. I said, Bob, you probably make your own mother sign the contract. And he perfectly serious said, absolutely, I do. I've got her signature on the contract. I make
I
no
don't think any
exception.
of us will ever forget that.
Anyway, it was pretty darn funny at the
Yes.
time, especially when you saw how serious he was about it. But Bob's a guy of commitment, and when he decides something, that's the way it's going to be.
So we've talked about SIAC. We've talked about past. We've talked about future concerns. What have I not asked you today that when we walk out this door, or Ralph Sevenar says, Kirk, you should have asked Stan about something? What is that question?
I don't know. I will say that the industry's been good to me, and I honestly didn't think that I would end up. I'm not quite at my grade level yet, but I didn't really want to be. I didn't want to have engraved on my tombstone, he worked on false alarms most of his life. But of course, it's so much more than false alarms. And I'm proud of things that I've done, the people I've met. It's been a rich experience. People like Charlie Darsch, Bob Boniface, the Ralph Sevenars, the Pat Egan's, the Kirk MacDowells. I mean, it's been a rich life that has given me more than I've given you guys or this industry. So I'm just grateful, grateful that I've been able to be a part of it,
Do you look to see that there is a gain, a solid gain in what you're handling now, what you're doing now?
Oh yeah, I mean we just mentioned here that we've embarked on a academic study. We've now seen cities that and I would, in my lifetime, wouldn't have believed it's possible that 95% of the permitted systems in a city now, where they've got a good ordinance that we put together over the years, when it's enforced, 95% of the citizens are not using any police response. We're talking about false alarm free, okay? In other words, 2 or 3% are causing almost all the problem. And it's not nationwide, but when there's a good ordinance and it's enforced, which proves the point, all this works, okay? And you can get up into the high 90% reductions in alarm dispatches. And that's a credit to the entire industry and the leadership and all the gains that we've made over the years.
Well, in closing.
Well, actually, Kirk, can I ask one question?
You sure can.
If you were just starting out, if 2 or 3 items, if someone coming into the industry, what would those 2 or 3 items you'd tell them to be a real professional and a success in our industry? Then I would present that to all of you.
Wow. Well, I'd say number one, get trained and understand the products of the customers, but get involved with the associations, network, learn from people that have experience. Don't be egotistical like I was when I first got into business. I didn't want to talk to anybody because I thought I knew it all. And how quickly you get humbled in this industry, So that's the best advice I think I can give anyone. Get involved, not just in your local or even your state, but also your national association.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. And I think it's appropriate when you're starting anything new that you do a lot more listening than talking, because then you can effectively communicate at the appropriate time. Seek out mentorship. Seek out people to be mentored. You mentioned some great names today. There are people in every association across North America and actually worldwide that will help young or people coming out of the service. They may have been in the service 25 years, but somebody coming new to the industry. Seek that out. And then once you're ready to give back 110%, because you will get that back threefold. And don't be remembered as the person that was always the taker, but always the giver.
Good words.
That sounds, yes, absolutely.
So, gentlemen, thank you so much. It's interesting because I think we have about 150 years of knowledge base just with the 3 of you here. So that is incredible. Nathan, any questions to ask?
No, that was awesome.
So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun, and I'm sure a lot of people are going to enjoy this.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you, Charlie.
Too.